Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today we're going to do a single tube exploration of a Daniel Smith watercolor. And we'll paint in the fast and loose tonalist style. This is the Mummy Bauxite, I'm not sure the pronunciation. And it is natural iron oxide. It does not say what pigment, just natural iron oxides. So, we'll just kind of jump into it. So I have a quarter sheet of the Stonehenge. This is the 90 pound and it's slightly toned. You can tell it's a little warm. If I put something white against it, you might be able to see a little bit of that difference there. It's not the best way to do kind of a complete tube study, but I'm just grabbing what paper I have pre-torn and ready. Soaking it with water. I'm going to go wet and wet, much like the modern tonalist oil painters. And we're going to wipe on and off and just build up our scene. It's really a relaxing technique. Let me show the pan so you can see what it's looking like. I'm thinking a darker light red oxide, maybe a darker Venetian red. Where did they say this is sourced from? I have their website up right alongside me. Chitskaya province. No idea where that is. Oh, nope. The mineral's name comes from Les Baux in southern France, where it was first identified in 19th century, but I'm not sure where that location they mentioned was. All right, we've been kind of debating a little bit of a high horizon. Yeah, we'll start off here. And how do I want this to go? So I'm just using the hake, just feeding it in, kind of getting a compositional idea. Yesterday, which was Saturday, I attended one of Stuart Davies' oil demos, and I'm not quite sure what the question was. But I think it was interesting where he was like, I really don't plan out most of my paintings. And I think the same thing happens for me, where there's really just not much planning out. Sometimes I'll sketch different compositional ideas, but I do find that I fall into the same, maybe the word would be rut, of creating the same scene over and over. I think that happens to a lot of us as we practice. We just probably don't see it historically. We probably do see it from who was it? Picasso with Guernica. I think that painting had 10 iterations of it. But with the masters, what survives over those long time periods, we don't usually have a lot of the same stuff shown over and over again. But then we see a lot of it from the 1800s on, where we see a lot of constant study of the same subject. I mean, if you look at, Monet with the haystacks, and I think it was his paintings of, Parliament? We see a lot of that taking place. So, just kind of food for thought whenever we start seeing the same scenes over and over. Okay, so I think this is how I want my composition. I'm going to have background tree line. Just feeding wet and wet sky. There we go. If this was to be matted, this would be cut off right about here. So it is a pretty high horizon line. Maybe kind of pull out a little bit, force an S-shaped composition. Have a landmass come out and up. I'm not really looking for hills, but they're appearing to be so. And cut that off right there. This will be a water edge separation. The landmass curving through here. Okay. So the other day I did a time lapse with the German greenish raw umber, which really surprised me. I did use very similar tinted paper, so I didn't wind up going for a full value exploration, but it was on the greenish side of things, which I always kind of consider raw umber to begin with to be greenish, and burnt umber to be more on the redder side of things. But I really played around wet and wet, and so much so that I just really didn't explore the post dry off phase. For me, with drying off, you'll know that I play around in wet and wet. It just allows me to move things around and blend things together. And then eventually I hit a point where I kind of blow dry and then see what I need to play around with, what changes wind up taking place value-wise. But it was so wet and wispy, and you can see spots like this that'll wind up drying very interestingly, that I could kind of think the same thing's going to happen here. I don't know if that's a subtle change happening in my approach or a short-lived thing, but it's something to think about and keep in mind. I follow a lot of Facebook pages that have old-timey photographs or old paintings, monochromatic, different things. But for me, the German greenish raw umber, I was thinking the salt prints, the old photos that were made. And I almost feel like this effect, this wet and wet, is going to cause the same thing. Now, whenever I flatten my paper, I use the back of my brush, but in some videos I was using the back of the brush to scrape, so you can see I'm leaving some color marks there, which is to happen. But anyway, so it makes me wonder about natural dry off versus blow dry or dry off. With this, it would push these puddles around, and I would have to use my blow dryer high up off the paper so that I'm not really getting much movement. Along the edges, just to kind of show you, I can pass the paper towel and the water will kind of run back in, and if I want to dry off in that fashion, that'll work as well. But I really am not a big fan of the kind of watermark edge that you get from those puddles, so I'm going to see what I can do to kind of move a little bit of that around. So I was playing around with Daniel Smith's the walnut ink, and the walnut ink dries very interestingly, where I've seen it with the India ink as well. It must just have to do something with I don't know, the ink pigments or something, where if you put a droplet down, it'll have darker edges, And I'm not sure if that has a name to it. I really don't want to say it's cauliflowering because it's not. Hey, Hammy. Not right now, bud. And Hammy just took a good nap. And then coming into here to paint, there's a slight delay due to Percy wanting to play fetch. I don't know if you guys have ever had a cat before that wanted to play fetch, but it is the coolest thing. So we're looking for S-shaped composition here, a kind of preparation for later effects, having kind of a soft tree element in this outcropping. And I'm thinking in this region is going to be our more, trying to think of the term while I ask Hammy not to hop on my lap, a more crisp tree in this area, right about here. So that's the idea. I could pull that white out a little further. I could mimic that here. Hammy, I know, bud. Just later on. This chair is quite squeaky. So, some thoughts on the color, and once again, noting that it's on not like a pure white paper. I'm seeing the granulation happening as that is slowly starting to dry, which is really nice. There's some browner elements wanting to happen as well. And it makes me think of, I don't know if it's the Daniel Smith, the Van Dyke brown, or the sepia, where that's another one where it's a collection of earth pigments. But I think they specify on that tube. I'll have to find the tube and see. By the way, this tube is on the cheaper side of things for Daniel Smith. 15 milliliters for probably $11 online. The watercolor paints in general seem to be just going up in price. And I don't know if that's just a matter of inflation and me starting in, let's say, 2008, 2009 with watercolor. But I've noticed that Cotman and Van Gogh, my two kind of go-tos, have gone up. Where if you're going to get a 20 milliliter of Cotman, you're probably spending about $7. Van Gogh, I'm not sure. I think their tubes are 12 milliliters, but I'm not sure the price off the top of my head. And you know that I'm a huge fan of the Da Vinci brand. The reason I mention all this is that if you choose to follow along, you can grab, I would say grab a tube of burnt umber, whatever you have burnt umber wise. Maybe mix a little bit of light red oxide into it. You don't have to use expensive paints. And this kind of technique, even though it's quite liberating, you do use quite a bit of paint with it. And yeah, just having the freedom of having cheaper pigments will allow you to explore and have more fun. I'm just kind of at the point where there's little things that I think I notice differences with. I don't know if many people would notice the difference or not, but it's stuff that I'm enjoying exploring. All right. So now, I'm also thinking some other things with the composition. It's very free-flowing, and I'm allowing things to occur naturally. And I'm noticing I could have this clear area almost come down as a path to the water's edge, and then it comes into this S shape. It's very atmospheric and very ethereal. And the water running up, if I leave it like that, it brings it up into the spot. Even kind of making this the center of interest. That's interesting. I'm really not the best on compositional theory, but having that there, that's pretty cool. I was exploring something else the other day in the time lapse with the German raw umber. I have a dry brush, or I think the Chinese would refer to it as a thirsty brush, where I'm just letting it kind of move or pick up pigment. And then from there, so I want to note that that's kind of turning the brownish purple in here. So I like that. So that might give us a recession, where if we keep more red here, we'll kind of get a natural atmospheric effect taking place, aerial perspective, where it's brown, purple, and red is closer to us. Just warm and cool naturally happening. Anyway, I was exploring this motion. Just, I'm left-handed, counterclockwise movement. Clockwise I can do, but I have a hard time catching the paper with it. And doing that, I don't know if it shows up that much, it kind of whips the grass marks up. And I'll probably do that at a later stage with some pigment on the brush, rather than it just kind of picking up pigment. I'm trying to show that more. So you can see I'm having a hard time with it clockwise, but it's just a motion that I'm experimenting with to build up fast and loose. It's almost like the whipping effect that we see the oil painters use, where they take their paper and they whip it to create lines. I've never quite got that to work with watercolor, but I'm also painting flat. I think I want to bring this grouping here. I think one of the things is everything's so close and pushing together that it might be a little bit difficult to see what I'm envisioning. Good. If I bring this guy up a little bit, there we go. Looks like a little edge and a cliff right here, but I'm gonna have to model it accordingly. So if I do just vertical strokes, I have a very harsh statement against this more horizontal movement. That might be a nice edge to play with that circular motion I was talking about. I don't want it to just be a mass that seems like it's floating there. One thing that kind of floats in my mind is a statement with Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, which I've mentioned quite a bit. I think he was the one who had said, you don't want viewers to say, oh, this is what the artist was trying to do. You know, you should be doing it. So let's take risks, lift up, move things around. What I'm going to do is bring this wider here to compete, not so much compete, but to overpower the width here. With linear perspective, to show that this is receding, I would have to have this kind of shorter and have that width there, where I could have my bigger vertical distance and having that same width. That kind of gives a flattened grass effect. And then you could come up here and create that upright. And that gives us a point of interest. It actually gives us 2 points of interest, which whenever I read up on compositional design, that's something that they always kind of seem to really not like too much, where it's risky. But personally, I really don't quite understand why that is so. I'm not sure where those thoughts, where compositional theory arises. So if you look at like the old Renaissance and Baroque paintings, you'll see a lot of the people in the painting maybe looking at the same thing, looking at the point of interest. And then in the Hudson River Valley paintings, we had the very picturesque paintings taking place. And then we had the tonalist movement, which was more intimate and impersonal. I would think that their paintings would have the one center of interest, the tonalist. And I wonder, I don't know, I'm just kind of speculating, just thinking out loud. So we have this path coming down here. There's a 1800s painter, German-American. I think he was taught in Germany, and then he came to America. Hermann Herzog. And I think you'll see a lot of pen and ink studies on this channel from about 2 years ago, looking at his work and looking at his compositions. And I really loved his foregrounds. And his background's absolutely fantastic too. But the foregrounds had a lot of interesting things going on to it, where something like this might be the little stream leading out into that other stream where the water's just coming off the land. And I'm looking to see if I can mimic that idea. Let's use that. I think, to be honest, we're almost past the point of really looking at the potential of this pigment, since we're now looking so much at potential composition and ideas. I want to break this up some. Stuff flowing down into here. Maybe break that off. Push this in a little bit. I can even push a little bit in from the other side as well. And that helps. Just a little bit out in front. There we go. Over that background. I want to have a natural path. I'm really harping on that quite a bit. So I'm going to reiterate what I'm talking about. If I have a water path heading back, if I have any type of path heading back, I really want it to shrink in size as it's going back and receding. We have this big circle here, this big circle here. The vertical height of this one is bigger than this one, so comparatively this will kind of come closer in the picture plane. The width of the two are about the same, which isn't the greatest. I could probably do a widen a little bit, and I'm playing very close to the edge of the paper, and then I can make marks here that'll push that back. Actually, here's a great opportunity for me to try that circular motion I was talking about. Just a quick way to build up tall grass. And I can grab a scraping tool, which I just dropped. Scrape some marks out as well. So now's a good time to talk about scraping. You could use a variety of materials. This one was handmade for me by a Mr. Mark. Very cool fella. But if you scrape with a rounded edge and you have a little moisture on the paper, you're going to have a wider mark. If you're using a sharp edge, here's a sharp edge. Oh, well, the moisture level is so low that it's pushing it all out of there. But if we were to use that edge when it was a little bit wetter, it would be a darker line taking place. You can use your fingernail. So here's my fingernail. Especially if you're not somebody to scrape often, you just use it just for a few marks. Just pop it in there. To reference David Usher with scraping, and ultimately Ron Ranson, it's very easy to overdo the scraping, especially with rocks. Now, where was I? As we progress, I'm seeing a softening overall of the entire application. So there is a tonal shift taking place. But I'm going to play around wet and wet for as long as I can. There are little tufts of grass amongst this little waterway coming down. Oh, I also mentioned before what you could use in exchange of this pigment. If you just want to follow along and play around, you're always welcome to follow along with anything that I do. And you're always welcome to sign your own name to anything that you do when you follow along. And you have my express permission to sell anything whenever you follow along with any of my videos. I want you guys to have fun. I want you to be successful and to have money for art supplies. Like I mentioned before, art supplies have gone up. I'm not sure if it's just the natural progression with each year, paint's getting more expensive or what, but I want you guys to have the funds to do that. And if you enjoy this channel, of course, please like, subscribe, follow. I have the Patreon linked down below if you want to donate anything, and I have exclusive content up there. A huge thank you to everybody that supports through the Patreon. I take that money and put it right back into the channel. I use it to explore different pigments, different materials, different papers, brushes, etc. And if there's anything you want me to explore, I can't promise that I'd be able to do everything, but let me know in the comments below. Let's see, let's go up here. Let's bring it down here. There we go. I'm looking at pulling up a tree here. So this is the number 1 rigger that I've been using. With the number 1, I think you can get funner lines with, I think they have smaller riggers, like they'll be like 0/something, or there'll be something in the title, but number 1's really good for little branches, twigs. You just have to kind of refresh it quite a bit. Sometimes I'll use the number 4, just because of the amount of pigment that it holds. Since I mentioned Ron Ranson, his book, Big Brush Painting, his rigger is a number 3. From brand to brand, I'm not sure if there's any sort of consistency in size between the numberings. So I think we see differences whenever we look at squirrel mops or quill brushes. But you'll see a numbering system, but there'll be some differences from brand to brand. But riggers shouldn't be too much of an issue. And of course, my go-to is the hake and the rigger, but that's what works for me. You can easily play around with the mop brush, with the Chinese brushes, with a flat, and see what works for you. Now, I'm not the best at the tiny twigs. Scrape it along edges. Let's pull up a little bit here too. Small tufts. I think now would be a good time for us to dry, see what type of shift takes place. Then I think we will do a second coat on top of this. Okay, so hit it with the blow dryer. This actually feels a little wet right here still. I'm really enjoying that subtle purple that's happening there. It makes me almost wonder if I did a lower horizon line, we would have had a lot more of that purple show through, just with softer background. But or we could really just highlight it from the fact that we had a high horizon line. It lifted easily when we were moving things around. It does show a little bit redder, a little bit more like a, I don't know, there's a slight difference between the the camera and the way it's looking in person. But very earthy, and granulation, you can start seeing how it would be in a second application. I don't want to make this video super long, but I think I'm gonna put out some fresh paint, and we'll see where we can start playing around with this. And we'll see how it dries in this stage. And this will be a good value study. We're not going to get the true color because we're on that slightly toned paper, but I think it's worth doing. Let's just bring up so I'm bringing this line right here closer to us just by simply darkening the value. And I really don't want solid strokes or thick strokes with it. I really want just to seem like I've done a lot without doing a lot. Here's that circular motion. I'm gonna whip them into place. This tree needs to be kind of grounded. Let's put a little bit on the hake. We could even use that to put the little wispy grass ends in, the little seed pods. I was thinking about this side. I'm going to bring that in. Just little areas of varying density. Varying tufts of grass. That's definitely straight from the tube. Let's bring that here. The same concept, just coming across the seed pods. This would be an interesting area to break up. Using a twig. Whether compositionally this is right or wrong, I'm not sure, but kind of influenced by the sketch that I studied from Claude Lorraine, where he had a path come down. Oh, and we had a triangular element here, but the water came up in front. If I showed you which one I was talking about, there probably wouldn't be a resemblance, but for me, there's kind of a concept taking place that's similar. And we'll just use this as an excuse to really explore it over that white of the paper. Too straight of a line. So while I'm doing this, let me know in the comments below what's been your favorite tube that you've been using lately. Is there any tube that you think that I just have to get and add and do a video on? Outside of the art room, I'm going to start getting ready for the Giant Omelet Festival, where I set up and display my paintings. At the end of last month, my solo exhibit came down. It was up for 2 months. So I'm getting ready to display at the Omelet Festival. Then after that will probably be a Christmas stroll that the town does. I'll set up an exhibit for that. I have a farmer's market coming up. Well, unfortunately, I was technically there at the farmer's market, just not at the farmer's market. The exhibit was right off the square, so I kind of set up in there for people that wanted to come through after going to the market to get a tour of the exhibit itself. But I think for this market, being so close to Halloween, I might just set up a little bit of stuff to sell and then just have a sign for like kind of Halloween portraits, just spooky portraits, and just having fun. I haven't even done a self-portrait in a while. I've just been very burnt out. I wind up going up that same, I must really just want to go in this direction. Which is funny that I must feel like I need to balance and lift this one up. Let's do a dry off and see where this is at. Alright, so I think I'm going to end this one here with a few just last minute thoughts about this tube. With monochromatic single tube studies, there's a lot of options that you have. You could really just have fun with it and really not have to dedicate a lot of money to a palette, and to even worrying about different colors, and if you're using the right thing in the right spot. It really just lets you explore tonal values and textures. Unless you're grabbing a pigment that's super opaque, you might have some difficulty with that. But for the most part, between this and, let me show you the German greenish one. And here, you can also use them to explore different moods and feelings, in addition to the compositions and everything else. So if you give this one a go, let me know. And of course, feel free to tag me on social media. I would love to see what you wind up doing. I'm going to wind up signing this off to the side. I might do some last minute touch-ups, but I'm going to leave it at this. I'm really, really happy with this tube. So on that note, I hope you all have a great day, and I will talk to you all soon. I'll sign it right here. All right.